So 2 weeks ago, an incredibly important Palestinian American journalist by the name of Shireen Abu Akleh that has been doing coverage on Israel to the Arab-speaking world for almost 30 years was assassinated in cold blood by the Israeli occupying force. The Israeli occupying force was doing a raid, like some of the other raids that they've conducted, into Jenin in the West Bank, which was a refugee camp. This is a UN-recognized refugee camp that they were doing a raid into, which they've been conducting for some time now. And during that raid, they basically openly, as we thought, according to eyewitness testimony of the people who were shot at, journalists. During that raid, they opened fire on a group of journalists that were very clearly marked as such. They were wearing press vests, they were wearing press helmets, and Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by being shot in the neck, meaning because she had armor on, someone personally, and we don't know if it was a sniper fire or not, but they believe it was a sniper fire, someone personally aimed in a place where they could shoot and kill Shireen Abu Akleh purposely. On purpose. That's what the eyewitness testimony on the ground said. That's basically what the immediate assumption was. And Israel, of course, did what it does all the fucking time and blame it on Palestinians and said that, like, no, it was a terrorist. It was a Palestinian terrorist that shot at them with no proof whatsoever. And then they showed a fake, or not a fake, but like a video from a totally separate part of the camp that was not even near where Shireen was, claiming that, look at these guys, they're shooting, and this is how they shot Abu Akleh. Yes, this is the Al Jazeera journalist. And then they quickly went and said, okay, maybe it wasn't, but we need to conduct an investigation. And obviously those investigations are always fucking bullshit, okay? Those investigations are always bullshit. It's like police investigations, you know? Police rarely ever investigate themselves and then find themselves to be guilty when they're doing police shit. And Israel certainly is not going to investigate the Israeli occupying force and find them guilty of doing Israeli occupying force shit. Like, their point is this. The thing is, she was part of the ever-shrinking Palestinian Christian community. She was an incredibly important person for the Arab-speaking world with all of her coverage over the past 30 years. And she was an American citizen. This time, they shot the wrong person. It's always unjustifiable and horrifying, but this time, there was a lot of backlash. So much so that when the funeral proceedings were happening, one of the things that the occupying forces did was beat the shit out of the people who were carrying the coffin. They assaulted the casket, all on camera. Hasan 98, yeah, but are you going to talk about the fact that Hamas is not inclusive? Oh, come on, dude. Let me read it and then fucking destroy this piece of shit. Yeah, dude, look at this. Look. I love that. I fucking love this fucking dog. You filthy fucking dog, you, okay? You fucking piece of shit, dude. Are you going to talk about the fact that Hamas is not inclusive towards the queer community? The IDF, on the other hand, is making great progress on that front. Yeah, the IDF is doing so great on that when they do their fucking LGBT bombs. You know what I mean? When they fucking indiscriminately fire missiles and have caused like the entire fucking, the entire child population of the Gaza Strip, which has like an incredibly high percentage of children, by the way, to have permanent PTSD. Yeah, they're vegan too, bro. Fucking monster. Anyway, CNN uncovered more details on the shooting to basically solidify what we knew already, which was that they targeted the group of journalists deliberately. Several shots rang out in quick succession, cutting through a clear blue spring morning in Jenin in the West Bank. Crack, crack, crack. The cameraman filming the scene scrambles backwards to take cover behind a low concrete wall. The man cries out in Arabic, "Injured, Shireen, Shireen, oh man, Shireen, ambulance." When the camera operator pans around the corner, Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh can be seen lying motionless, face down on the ground as another Palestinian reporter, Shata Hanaisha, crouches down beside her using a tree trunk for cover. Hanaisha reaches out and tries to rouse her as gunshots continue. There's no response. Both women are wearing helmets and blue protective vests marked press. In the moments that follow, a man in a white t-shirt makes several attempts to move Abu Akleh, but is forced back repeatedly by gunfire. Finally, after a few long minutes, he manages to drag her body from the street. The shaky video filmed by Al Jazeera cameraman Majdi Banura captures the scene when Abu Akleh, a 51-year-old Palestinian American, was killed by a bullet to the head around 6:30 a.m. on May 11th. She had been standing with a group of journalists near the entrance of the Jenin refugee camp, where they had come to cover an Israeli raid. While the footage does not show Abu Akleh being shot, eyewitnesses told CNN they believe Israeli forces on the same street street fired deliberately on the reporters in a targeted attack. That's what the Palestinians said. That's also what the journalists that were shot at said. And yet Israel was like, no, fuck off. That's not what happened. It's actually the Palestinians that shot them. And people were upset for like half a day. And then they went back to fucking, I don't know, watching Johnny Depp and Amber Heard play out their narcissistic, weirdo fucking fantasy on this never-ending, seemingly never-ending court case. Everyone forgot about it. We stood in front of the Israeli military vehicles for about 5 to 10 minutes before we made moves to ensure they saw us. And this is a habit of ours as journalists. We move as a group. We stand in front of them so they know we're journalists, and then we start moving, Hanisha told CNN, describing their cautious approach towards the Israeli army convoy before the gunfire began. Audio and video analysis indicates that Palestinian-American journalist was shot from a distance about 200 meters. Israel claims she could have been hit by Palestinian militants or an Israeli soldier returning fire during a raid at the Jenin refugee camp. But eyewitnesses say there were no armed Palestinians or clashes in her vicinity. Abu Akleh was shot dead here around 6:30 a.m. Footage from the scene showed a direct line of sight towards the Israeli convoy. Here's the 200-meter distance where the Israeli body cam footage and social media videos place the Israeli army vehicles here, minutes before Abu Akleh is shot. The only recorded positions of Palestinian militants were further south of the camp, where they clashed with Israeli forces earlier that morning. The gunmen were too far from Abu Akleh to have fired the fatal shot, according to a firearms expert. As soon as Shireen fell, I honestly wasn't comprehending that she was shot. I was hearing the sound of bullets, but I wasn't comprehending that they were coming at us. Honestly, the whole time, I wasn't understanding. I thought they were shooting, so we stayed back. I didn't think they were trying to kill us. On the day of the shooting, Israeli military spokesperson Ron Kochav told Army Radio that Abu Akleh had been filming and working for a media outlet amidst armed Palestinians. They're armed with cameras, if you'll permit me to say so, according to the Times of Israel. Armed with cameras, exposing Israeli war crimes is a crime in and of itself. You know how in America, like, racists will say, like, oh, you talking about how someone is racist is worse than the actual racism? Same energy. It's just supremacist attitude for a different in-group. They're armed with rocks. Palestinians are armed with rocks. They're armed with cameras. I mean, what else can they be armed with at that point? Israeli military says it is not clear who fired the fatal shot. Well, originally they didn't say that. Originally they said it was the Palestinians. The army said there was a possibility Abu Akleh was hit either by indiscriminate Palestinian gunfire or by an Israeli sniper positioned about 200 meters away in an exchange of fire with Palestinian gunmen, though neither Israel nor anyone else has provided evidence showing armed Palestinians within a clear line of fire from Abu Akleh. The Israeli Defense Force said on May 19th that it had yet not decided whether to pursue a criminal investigation. On Monday, the Israeli military's top lawyer, Major General Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi, said in a speech that under the military's policy, a criminal investigation is not automatically launched if a person is killed in the midst of an active combat zone, unless there is credible and immediate suspicion of a criminal offense. United States lawmakers in the UN and the international community have all called for an independent probe. You know how well those independent probes go, for the record. But an investigation by CNN offers new evidence, including 2 videos of the scene of the shooting, and there was no active combat nor any Palestinian militants near Abu Akleh in the moments leading up to her death. Videos obtained by CNN, corroborated by testimony from 8 eyewitnesses, an audio forensic analyst, and an explosive weapons expert, suggest that Abu Akleh was shot dead in a targeted attack by Israeli forces. Shocking. Actually, it is shocking. It's shocking that CNN would be doing visual investigation, uncovering the truth about this assassination. It is shocking to think that a liberal mainstream media outlet, which normally serves a propaganda machine purpose, they killed children aged less than 10 years and no one moved. Do you expect them to move for a journalist? Yes. I do. And the reason why is because she was an American citizen. And that's why I think that, and she's a famous person. I think that's the reason. It's sad, but it's the truth. When another 11-year-old is like murdered viciously alongside their family in yet another crazy attack, like missile strikes in Gaza, that's just a statistic. But when you're talking about a journalist who was shot directly by Israeli sniper fire, and there is plenty of evidence to show that they did this, it's going to be a little hard to lie about it. On IG Live, AOC suggests cutting military aid to Israel in the wake of killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. She was killed by Israeli forces. You know we can't allow this stuff to be happening with our resources. We can't even get healthcare in the U.S., and we're funding this. That's what she said, which, they're going to eat her ass on the fucking QRTs for sure. They're going to fucking... AOC on criticism that she's singling out Israel. Like a lot of times people say, you are picking them out and treating them differently. Our tax dollars are a part of this. Our resources are a part of this. They try to make it seem as though believing that Palestinians are human beings that deserve human rights is like somehow inherently anti-Semitic. It's not, and it's insulting to the actual profound amount of anti-Semitism that our Jewish brothers and sisters are confronting right now. Yeah, they'll use this as be like, yo, look at how anti-Semitic she is, or some shit. Israel has been busy. Kill the top Palestinian journalist, kill the Palestinian boy, bomb Syria's international airport, killing 3 people, and now very likely assassinated an Iranian colonel in Tehran. Typical Israel, bullying people, picking on others, and playing the victim. I don't know the other stuff, but I mean, it's not surprising that is happening. If this was anywhere else in the Middle East and an American was killed, this would be blowing up. It would be blowing up way more than it is right now, for sure. But this level of coverage is new, even then. There was a frisson of excitement as the veteran journalist, a household name across the Arab world for coverage of Israel and Palestinian territories, arrived to report on the raid. About a dozen or so men dressed in sweats and flip-flops had gathered to watch Abu Aklek and her colleagues at work. They were milling around chatting, some smoking cigarettes, others filming the scene on their phones. In one 60-minute cell phone video shared with CNN, the man filming walks towards the spot where the journalists had gathered, zooming in on the Israeli armored vehicles parked in the distance, says, "Look at snipers." Then a teenager peers tentatively up the street. He shouts, "Don't kid around. You think it's a joke? We don't want to die. We want to live." Israeli raids on the Jenin refugee camp have become a regular occurrence since early April in the wake of several attacks by Palestinians that left Israelis and foreigners dead. Some of the suspected assailants of those attacks were from Jenin, according to the Israeli military. Residents say the raids often lead to injuries and deaths. On Saturday, a 17-year-old Palestinian was killed and an 18-year-old was critically injured by Israeli fire during a raid, the Palestinian Ministry of Health said. Salim Awad, the 27-year-old Jenin camp resident who filmed the 16-minute video, told CNN that there were no armed Palestinians or any clashes in the area and that he hadn't expected there to be gunfire given the presence of journalists nearby. There was no conflict or confrontations at all. We were about 10 guys, give or take, walking around, laughing, joking with the journalists, he said. We were not afraid of anything. We didn't expect anything would happen because when we saw journalists around, we thought it would be a safe area. But the situation changed rapidly. Awad said shooting broke out about 7 minutes after he arrived on the scene. His video captures the moment that shots were fired at the 4 journalists, Abu Aklek Hanaisha and another Palestinian journalist, Mujahid al-Saadi, and the Al Jazeera producer Ali al-Samoudi, who was injured in the gunfire. He was one of the witnesses, one of the key witnesses who was shot himself. Was himself shot by the Israeli military that so many people in Western media didn't even fucking listen to, or at least didn't take seriously enough to fucking add his eyewitness testimony as someone who was a victim of Israeli gunfire to take the consideration, take his words into consideration when covering this and writing headlines like, "A famous Palestinian journalist dies during Jenin raid and clashes," you know, shit like that. So just remember that when you think about like the Associated Press and everyone else. We saw around 5 or 4 military vehicles on the street with rifles sticking out of them, and one of them shot Shireen. We were standing right there. We saw it when we tried to approach her. They shot at us. I tried to cross the street to help, but I couldn't, Awad said, adding that he saw that a bullet struck Abu Aklek in the gap between her helmet and the protective vest just by her ear. A 16-year-old who was among the group of men and boys on the street told CNN that there were no shots fired, no stone throwing, nothing before Abu Aklek was shot. He said the journalist had told them to not follow as they walked towards Israeli forces, so he stayed back. When the gunfire broke out, he said he ducked behind a car on the road 3 meters away, where he watched the moment she was killed. The teenager shared this video with CNN, filmed at 6:36 a.m., just after the journalist left the scene for the hospital, which showed the 5 Israeli army vehicles driving slowly past the spot where Abu Aklek died. The convoy then turns left before leaving the camp via the roundabout. They were like, yeah, we got our kills for the day. Let's move on. CNN reviewed a total of 11 videos showing the scene and the Israeli military convoy from different angles before, during, and after Abu Aklek was killed. Eyewitnesses who were filming when the journalist was shot were also in the line of fire and pulled back when the gunfire started, so do not capture the moment she is hit with a bullet. The visual evidence reviewed by CNN includes a body camera video released by the Israeli military, which captures soldiers running through a narrow alleyway holding M16 assault rifles and variants as they spill out onto the street where the armored vehicles are parked. An Israeli military source told CNN that both sides were firing M16 and M4 style assault rifles all day. In the videos, 5 Israeli vehicles can be seen lined up in a row on the same road where Abu Aklek was killed. To the south, the vehicle close to the journalist, emblazoned with a white number 1. The Israeli military referenced such an opening in a statement about its initial investigation in the Abu Aklek shooting, saying that the journalist may have been hit by an Israeli soldier shooting from a designated firing hole in an IDF vehicle using a telescopic scope during an exchange of fire. Several eyewitnesses told CNN that they saw sniper rifles sticking out of the openings before shooting began, but that was not preceded by any other gunfire. Jamal Huwail, a professor at the Arab American University in Jenin who helped drag Abu Akleh's lifeless body from the road, said he believed the shots were coming from one of the Israeli vehicles, which he described as a new model which had an opening for snipers because of the elevation and direction of the bullets. They were shooting directly at the journalists. While a former parliamentarian and a member of the Palestinian Fatah party in Jenin first met Abu Akleh 2 decades ago when Israel launched a major military operation in the camp, destroying more than 400 homes and displacing a quarter of its population. That's just a regular old experience for Palestinians, by the way. As the world fucking turns as the world looks away. She had showed him a video of one of the early interviews. The next time he saw her up close, she was dead. Yeah, pretty conclusive that the original assessment that we had here on this broadcast, along with, by looking at the firsthand accounts, eyewitness testimony, and the images itself, was true. That Israel personally targeted journalists in this manner. And, I'm just going to let you guys know, there will probably be, not to be too much of a doomer, but there's probably not going to be justice in this particular instance. If there is justice in this particular instance, that doesn't change the reality of the occupation and the apartheid state that Israel has carefully crafted through a sequence of brutal actions against the Palestinian people as the entire world turns a blind eye, and in some instances, like the United States, actually offers material support to the state to continue doing its genocidal actions against Palestinian people. Israel Army... On May 23, oh nice, Israel's army said Monday that if an Israeli soldier fired the shot that killed the Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, it did not appear that the soldier was guilty of criminal misconduct. The reason why they do it is because they can. I mean, how is this any different than, we didn't do this murder, it was probably the Palestinians, but if it's not the Palestinians and if it's us, it's actually not even a murder and good. Like that was the line of defense that they ran as they fucking, as they atrophied public interest once again on yet another brutal act of violence against the Palestinian person.